Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today, I guarantee we have a conversation that we all need to hear. We're all going to want to hear. We're going to be talking to Sanja Gabler. Now, Sanja is the CRO at Trapets, and you have recently been the CMO rolled into now the CR role, where you have marketing, you have sales, you have customer success. You basically have the whole go-to-market motion underneath you. And so what we're going to be talking about is how do we get things done in that go-to-market strategy, right? As a CMO, now CRO, and having played both sides in that role, how do you think about that? How do you make that transition? But most importantly, how does that impact the go-to-market plan? So as we get into this, we're going to unpack all of that, but I'd love to have you just explain maybe a little bit more about your background before we get started.
Yes, thank you, Steve. Glad to be here. Super excited for our conversation. Yes, I am currently the CRO of Trapets. We are a SaaS company focused on regulatory technology. So what we do is that we support financial institutions to combat financial crime. Until a month ago, I was the CMO of Trapets and been with the company as a CMO for about coming up now 2 years. And my background is it has been within the domain. I think it's about 15 plus years within the marketing. However, I would say I'm not the traditional marketeer. I come more from a business development point of view, crafting digital products and digital development. So I'm really from that side rather than coming from the traditional comms or brand marketing background. But very excited today for our conversation and also hoping to provide some good insights to your audience.
Well, good. So we're going to start with the juicy stuff right away, right? This transition from CMO to CRO. Here's what I want to ask you first, right? There's been some really interesting conversations internally, right, about the CRO role and who's going to be in the CRO role and why. And I don't want you to reveal anything that's confidential or anything, but the decision-making of moving you as a CMO into this role and then what you needed to accomplish, I'd love just to start there.
Yeah, I think it's needless to say, it is a rare transition. We see it more and more, but I think from what we needed as a company, if you just remove the fact that a C-suite, a CRO role, it's no longer maybe, the best salesperson that gets promoted and leading the team. I think the CRO today comes down to a lot around, how do we build, efficient sales processes? How do we build efficient processes when we go to market, which include obviously marketing, sales, and customer success. I think is a lot around technology and data capabilities, much more than maybe it has been before. And also, how do you get that, successful team set up and organization crafted? And with that said, that doesn't necessarily need to be a CRO that has been, selling the best in the company. So I think that is how we had the discussion, like what does the company need? And currently we are in that scaling phase where we need to go from, going from a smaller mid company to really scaling our business. So in that regard, we really needed somebody that can build those processes, getting that technology working, that, insight driven to get that best go-to-market motion going.
So, what I'm taking away from what you said there is that there are very functional roles in marketing and sales and customer success.
Yeah.
But the leader in the CRO role that oversees all of that, the most important thing is how do you have the right vision for taking the business from here to there, right?
Yeah.
So that is a strategic business leader, a visionary in terms of the business and how it's structured, what products and services are we bringing to market, the competition, what does it look like, the trends in the marketplace, right? You have to look at all of that and say long-term sustainable growth. I have levers, marketing and product and sales, and I have all these different levers that I can pull, but who's going to be the leader that brings that together into a plan, right? And works with the rest of the C-suite. So What I'd love to do, though, is start out with one of the age-old issues that I think you've solved really well because you're the person right now. You're the CMO.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But so I want to get your opinion on this. We've done 8 different episodes on why the B2B CMOs fail so quickly. We're, I think, in our third with CROs on why do B2B CROs fail so quickly. Both roles have the shortest tenures in the C-suite.
yeah,
So the number one reason that comes out is misalignment, right? That there's silos that are happening. So
yeah.
since you're the same person, I think you've solved the silo issue, right?
Yeah, 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 for sure. But I mean, it hasn't always been like that. I've been in other companies where I definitely felt that, misalignment between sales and marketing. I think that's quite a common problem, right? Or challenge for a lot of organizations. Yeah.
So how do you think about that? Because you still have marketing leaders, you still have
Yeah.
sales leaders, you still have customer success leaders, right? And they have to not operate in silos. So now that you have kind of control over the silo strategy or the
Yeah.
anti-silo strategy, how do you ensure, other than just yourself overseeing all of that, but how do you get everybody working on the same team?
It's a really good question, and once again, hard not to crack, obviously, because we're still discussing it. I think it has been a topic for decades around, misalignment between sales and marketing specifically. It really comes down to really clear targets, obviously, comes from like the top. So that is like the strategy and the management, obviously, and even the ownership and the board needs to be super clear, like what do we aim to achieve? If we like take it down a notch, I think it's super important. For my instance, for example, I worked a lot with my marketing teams previously to understand the revenue side of things so that, moving that supporting pretty department company to actually understanding that, the contribution that each individual are doing needs to be some sort of contributing to that revenue. And I think if you have that mindset, it will be a much more likelihood of success to really be aligning with sales to understand, like we understand in marketing that you need to hit a quota. How can I contribute to kind of open up those conversations to be that top of mind and whatnot to really help sales hitting that quota? So I think it's a lot around having revenue mindset in the marketing team because once again, I think there's so many different type of marketeers. I mean, marketing is such a complex area, but you really need to craft into your individuals that you are really contributing to the revenue and not, a cost center or, doing pretty things or arranging the office or whatever. That's obviously also important, but like 90% needs to be a revenue driven activity.
In a lot of different organizations, there's revenue operations, there's VP of revenue marketing, right? Which is probably another term for performance marketing, right? There's a
Yeah.
number of different ways that we've tried to say revenue marketing is important, right? So how do you instill that culture though? It's one thing to say, right? We need to be more revenue minded, right? Now I can think of like revenue operations, right? Okay, very functionally, how are we tracking? How are we measuring? How are we looking at the data? How are we projecting how, what we're doing here is going to go all the way down and impact sales at the end? How do you think about that? Like going beyond the mindset, but kind of instilling a revenue process, right, across these teams.
It comes also down to the KPI. So, for instance, in marketing, we measure, okay, how much like marketing sourced pipeline do we generate, and also obviously influence revenue. And then we also look at, okay, how much of that is actually closing. And I think using that as a tool to go back to the marketing, like, guys, you know what, you are part of this deal that is worth, X amount of money. I think that is a really powerful tool because maybe not a lot of marketeers might be, can I say, used to getting that type of feedback. They're more getting the feedback of, oh, this was a great campaign or great, great content piece or whatnot. But actually saying like, okay, so when we are closing this deal, this was actually sourced from a marketing perspective. So you actually, like, part of this is actually on your end, to contribute it. So then that becomes very real, that marketers feel like, okay, I'm actually bringing money into the company on paper. So I think, and that comes down to, as a CMO, you need to really evaluate your team based on kind of hard metrics. And then you might, trickle it down, because once again, if you are a SEO specialist within the team, you need to maybe have much more like metrics but then it needs to be metrics that then you can show, okay, how does that influence, the marketing source revenue that we as a group has as, the main metric. So that is one example to kind of instill that. Another, like, really practical, I talk about, small things like wordings. Like, I say it's not sales or marketing. Okay, was this opportunity or lead, was that from sales or marketing? But instead of, no, it's a sales and marketing effort. Because once again, attribution, that marketeers, revenue officers, as we have spent a lot of time on attribution, I think, and that has created this marketing or sales. But instead of just making the joint effort of, like, this is the revenue target that we need to hit, whether it is coming from marketing or sales, it's a team effort to really to nail that target. So those are like small things, like the wordings, like say sales and marketing and customer success, rather than sales or marketing or customer success.
So here are two things I think were brilliant about what you said there is, if the words that you use, that becomes the culture, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not individual teams, it's one team, and we all contribute. I know I'm a B2B SaaS founder myself, and I didn't look at it as marketing versus sales versus customer success. It was just, what is the go-to-market, right? And
Yeah.
and what kind of success are we having there? The first thing that you said that I've actually never thought about is, if you start to give, you say you have ownership as marketing, customer success, not just sales.
Yeah.
We all know that. And that's, everybody talks about we have to be more owners of the pipeline. But
Yeah.
if you could actually attribute and give recognition back to, say, marketing, from the time we were 5, and we said, mommy, look, I'm jumping on one leg, right? We want to be recognized.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
more that we can be recognized for that, then the more ownership we will have,
Yeah.
right? The more motivation we will have, because we were recognized from above that we have an important role in revenue contribution. Go
Yeah.
back 10 years ago, that never happened.
So now we're talking a lot about the marketing, just the mind shift that you need to do is that it is an investment and it is a growth builder. And I think we come from a place where, it's been on the bottom line, and the top line growth has always been, sales, 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 sales. So, but if you can have an organization that understand, okay, who is actually contributing to create top line growth, and that is essentially, sales, marketing, and also if you have customer success that also are responsible for upsell, for instance, and cross-sell. If you can really instill that you guys are growing the top line, you are not a bottom line entity or cost, then that also gives, I think, understanding to, okay, I'm actually contribute to growing the company in terms of like bringing in revenue. People sometimes, these are just like, business ABC. Okay, what grows top line, what goes bottom line, and how does it, add up? And I think sometimes maybe you need to go back to that basic. Okay, so what is the actual purpose of marketing, sales, and customer success? Well, it is, bringing in those conversations, nailing those conversations, and making those conversations valuable. And that is all, a top line growth.
I have to ask you a question, because this came up with a number of CROs that I've had a conversation with, and there's this misalignment, right, between the different departments. That also means there's misalignment on really key things like the definition of our ACP.
Yeah.
And there was a study that came out, And I asked the question of like, what do you think is like the percentage alignment between marketing sales and the definition of the ICP? And everybody thinks, okay, it's probably below 50%. So I'm going to throw out a number. It's actually 16%. This,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
right? So how do we ever have a go-to-market motion that is aligned if we're not even talking about who is it exactly that we're reaching? Because as that strategic business leader that you were talking about, the long-term growth is bringing in the right customers that will
Yeah.
be retained, and our NRR is expanding and growing, right?
Yeah.
And so, but there is a tendency in sales, right, to never miss an opportunity. So I
Yeah.
literally asked these CROs, I said, do you ever say no?
Yeah.
Because bringing in the wrong ICP means that
Yeah.
we're not as well equipped to handle them. They will churn, right? We will waste resources internally. It might help get the short-term quota, but
Yeah.
it won't, it'll hurt the long-term growth of the company. And so I just want to know what your perspective is on that in terms of, you know, going after, defining the right
Yeah.
ICP, maybe even saying no at some time.
Yeah, I think that is one of the biggest challenge, and that is also one of the kind of misalignment causes between sales and marketing, and also customer success that is actually delivering and making that successful. I think marketing can sometimes have I mean, we are usually driving that ICP. If you don't have a management that owns the ICP, it comes down to maybe that the marketing department owns that ICP. So you do the work, but then that, sales feels like, okay, maybe 50% is kind of right, but 50% is kind of off, or even, 60%, 16% is right, but like, 84% is wrong. I think that is really where can be causing that friction between sales and marketing. And also then customer success, like delivering and making that successful, they have, added on like, no, this is way off. We know that, this doesn't work and whatnot. I think it's super important that the ICP ownership is in the management. So you get that from start. Then I think it's super important, like, once again, you need to kind of incentivize the fact that you are doing business with your ICP. I think that is a really good key. Like incentivizing, meaning, because it is difficult to say no to business. Like we are struggling with that all the time, is the shiny object syndrome. You want to have that because it's such a good deal, but you get blamed from the marketing team, like, oh, it's not in our ICP, and customer success will be like, oh my God, we've never done this type of, like, it's not fitted at all. But I think it's really with that, you need to incentivize deals that are done with the ICP. You get higher commission for that, and deals that are not, they are not commission at all. That might be brutal, but I do think that those are type of measurements or tools that you can use to overcome that. Because we know that it is difficult to say no to business. I think, needless to say, you have the quota. It is a tougher market. We have really long sales cycles. It is challenging to really say no. And I think to also hedge for that difficult situation, you need to already in the start. And that's why this comes to the marketing to really come in, like, who are the leads that come in? That needs to be, 80, 90% right, you know?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. If you don't have a good start and you're not bringing the right people in, then
Yeah, and then
the
you get
blame
that
right at
blame
the end when
game.
we're
Yeah, and
trying
you
to
get that
force.
blame. You buy this was an inbound from you guys, and you're telling me now I can't do business with this, and yeah, you get that, difficult conversations. So yeah, early on, say no early on. It's going to be tougher later,
Yeah.
and also work with that incentivizing that. Yeah, you get more commission if you do business with an ICP versus if you don't. And also, I say a third thing is that, I mean, we do have a kind of a process. So if you want to do business with somebody that is an outlier, or kind of, we call it like an acceptable, then we do have to do a commercial decision around that. So we know what that will require.
Oh, and even just having that process in place and knowing that you're going to have to go through getting approval
Yeah.
is one step, further down the path of saying we're not going to just take anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really important. Um, You talked previously about a passion for hands-on problem solving. What did you mean by that?
I am a very solution or solving oriented person. With that said, that, you can identify a problem, but I'm quite quick to kind of, okay, how do we break down the problem and how can we start to solve things? And that's the way that, you know, just getting things done, really. I actually thought about like when we're going to have this conversation around problem. There are a lot of problems, there are a lot of challenges, but I spend very little time on thinking about the problem, but more like, okay, how do we solve it? How do we break it down? What needs to be done? And how can we time box it and whatnot? Good at some point in business is good, not as successful sometimes in the private life, but for business, it's very good.
So,
But yeah, I am very passionate about like getting things done. Like I don't like it to stretch it out and you need to internally discuss things and you need to marinate it and whatnot. I am more like, okay, let's try it, let's test it, let's have a hypothesis or stake in the ground and start to act on it.
I like that, the hypothesis and the testing. And because if you're afraid of failure, that's what I'm hearing as well. There's a hypothesis, which means it may be right, it may not. But let's start testing. Let's find it out. Let's not be afraid of trying these new things and solving these problems, because problems will always come. Everything's
Yeah.
always shifting. So if you don't have a thought process of how you're going to do that, I like that. You also talk about in operations is not necessarily always lumped into the go-to-market strategy, right? Which I've never totally understand. But you actually talk about staying close to operations.
Yeah.
Why? What's your thought on that?
I think even though whether I'm an officer or whether I'm a manager or director, I really want to be really close to the execution. I say be an executor, not an executive, because that's really where you get that in the front line, knowing, okay, so what you're planning up here, how does that actually work? I've always been wanted to be really close to operations, and I've actually also left previous roles because I'm too away from the operation. That can be when you're part of a huge company or whatnot. I think it's super important because that's when you can experience things. That's where you can really tweak your strategy or kind of, okay, we are pivoting this because I've heard and experienced this doesn't work. And they'll be like in the operational floor. And I think that is super important for us as executive with great responsibility that you are down, you know, getting your hands dirty, obviously trusting the teams. There's a balance there, but never miss out on being that, listening on that operational floor. I think is crucial for success for any company and also especially with great responsibility as a revenue officer.
So I have to ask you this question. You talked about experience, if you can experience it. Gartner, McKinsey came out with studies, and the big takeaway is that long-term sustainable competitive advantage today in a world of rapid technological innovation, ChatGPT, writing
Yeah.
code, right?
Yeah.
Most companies having upwards of 20, 25 different competitors, that
Yeah.
product and price, which have been the bastion of competitive advantage for
Yeah.
decades, right? Forever, are no longer the number one source of competitive advantage. Their point of view is that the customer experience, CX, is
Yeah.
the long-term number one sustainable competitive advantage. I'd just love to ask you about you. Do you agree with that? And if you do, why?
I agree with that. It's not that easy to compete with customer experience because it is based on that you need to experience things, and that goes to your previous experience, what you have been exposed to and whatnot. It's not replicable, like you can't compete customer experience in that sense. I think that we are doing that a lot. So even though we are in SaaS and we want to grow a scalable business, I think one of our traits are actually within how are we treating our customers and how are we doing business with our customers. And that is all about the experience. Because trust is what is crucial when it comes to B2B soft, B2B in general. And I think trust is very correlated with how you experience interactions, how you experience, okay, how do I interact with the support? How do I interact with my sales rep? How do I interact with my customer success manager? How do I interact with an integration specialist? That is the trust builder that potentially then becomes that competitive edge from you being chosen over another competitor.
I'm going to add on and ask about this. I was talking with a 3-time B2B CMO, and he said, Steve, I'll put it to you this way. I believe that CX is the number one competitive advantage. The way that we're going to have that advantage is by understanding our customer, our ICP, better than our competition, because then we can better define the customer experience, right? So the idea of this deep understanding of the ICP, obviously, not only does it extend out to customer experience, it extends to marketing, sales, customer success, operations, right? They're the highest authority in our business. So I just want to, as somebody that now is pulling in controlling so many levers inside of your company, how do you think about that deep understanding of the ICP and how important to really have that it is to the whole revenue operation and growth and sustainable growth of the company?
That is crucial. If you don't understand who you want to deal with and how you want to serve, then obviously that's going to be very difficult getting customers, but also growing your company. So that is crucial. The ICP also needs to, like, you need to iterate because we are moving in a changing. So with that said, is that you have a deep understanding, but then you also need to iterate your ICP so that you also changing your customer experience. So you don't become like very set, like we did this ICP work, that's great, now it's set, and we set it for 3 years ahead. But really need to work with like what has changed. Do we then need to change our delivery, how the experience is when they interact with us? So I think you need to that deep in understanding, yes, but you need to also evolve the profile as well so that you can improve your experience. I think sometimes we can focus a lot, like we want to give the best customer experience, which I mean, all company wants to do. But sometimes it's really, okay, we just need to be a little bit better than our competition. And that sometimes can be quite low on the bar. Like it can be, if you have a competitor, they're really bad and, connecting, giving feedback, or they're only doing like chat bots or whatever, we can be like, okay, but we call them instead with a human voice. It can be that easy, like those small things that sometimes you say, what is the best customer experience? But sometimes it's just being better than your competition. And that can be quite small things. That can also just as a tip and back to kind of getting things done, sometimes doing that deep research might just be super easy. Like, what are the competitors doing? Okay, they're just doing chatbots. Okay, let's have humans answering the phones. Okay, we have the best customer experience. Could be.
Right. But if we don't, I think your point is that we have to engineer that customer experience.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's traditionally not something that is in the functional silo of marketing, sales, the typical go-to-market motions. So what I'm taking away is what you're saying is that's one of the new responsibilities that you're taking on as, running go-to-market is how do we also think about how do we engineer that customer
Yeah.
experience? That'd be a good takeaway.
Yeah. And I think, well, once again, I think that is also what expectations are we putting on our delivery and why we do business. So, for instance, in our business, so we are helping compliance organizations being compliant. That's what we do. If we do more than getting the compliance officer, the hero, but actually, okay, you know what? You need to tweak on the processes, or an operations officer might have this under his or her responsibility, but actually leveling up, like how you can be more proactive in that. That is really like leveling up the customer experience and also like going beyond the kind of expectation of what we just compliance software. So I think it's also like exceeding, and this is like challenging a little bit your own kind of, okay, what place in the market are you? So we're placed in compliance software, okay, but how about stretching it? Like, okay, we can be improving or challenging and being more proactive. that I think also can meet and exceed expectation, which in return will then generate obviously a greater experience than your competition.
I love it. We've talked about a lot. I'm going to ask you 2 questions in one. What haven't we talked about that's important? And what is the single most important takeaway that you want people to have after watching this episode?
I think it's just really difficult. We are all in a really hard-hitting market. Like, it's getting tougher to get the revenue. It's getting tougher to narrow down your ICP. It's getting tougher to say no to business, all the things that we've gone through. So I think it's just really focusing and simplifying things. Remove rather than adding. I think that's just really good point. And that would be a takeaway to the audience. Do few things better than adding a lot of things, doing them good. Because that's, from my experience, that's where you are becoming that siloed, you're having that misalignment. There's a lot of things to focus on and whatnot. If you can be super clear on these are the target, these are a few things that we need to do, this is how everybody contributing, that simplification will then give you that push to actually succeed.
I love it. I love it. I wish we had another 3 hours to talk, but I know people are going to have additional questions. And would it be appropriate that we gave out a link to your LinkedIn profile so that people could reach out?
Yes, sure. Just look me up. I'm on LinkedIn, Sanja Gabler. I think I don't know that many, so you should find me there. And yeah, do shoot me questions or any concerns or insights they want to share.
Well, Sanja, thank you so much for coming on and sharing today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Steve, for having me. It's been a really great conversation, and I'm excited to hear more from you.